Got really quiet.
Supposed to be. Okay. Almost on the. I don't know if you can speak. You can do that. Just look and see. Oh, he's a panelist, Amber, so he should be able to talk. So with that, he should be able to talk. Okay, cool. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I see him. Okay. Cool. Just gonna move this down so we can still see the slides.
Hey, good evening and welcome to the joint study session with the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Commission. Again, just for the viewing online and in-person audience. So this is a study session. We typically don't have time scheduled for public comment. We will have a hard stop on this meeting at 18:50 and we will begin. If I could ask the DEI Commission members to please introduce themselves.
I'll start. Hello, everyone. Amber Hofer. I'm one of the vice chairs for the DEI Commission.
And can I remind folks to speak into the microphone so everybody online can hear as well?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, that was good. Yes, it's on. Amber Hofer. I'm one of two vice chairs for the DEI Commission.
Hello, I'm Emily Temby O'Brien, regular commissioner.
I'm Candy Cleary, regular commissioner.
I'm Teresa Devine, and I'm a commissioner.
Eileen Cornell, also co-vice chair.
And Phil, if you'd introduce yourself.
Phil Backlund, commission member.
Okay.
I'll take it back. I'm start us off here. Okay, so again, Amber. So we have a very quick 50-minute study session. And so we are highlighting 3 distinct conversations. Before we get to that, we're going to go through a little bit of education and background on the DEI Commission. I think one of the reasons we were hoping to have this study session is because we've had a lot of community conversations. Thanks, Heidi. Lots of community conversations about both City Council and the DEI Commission. So thought this was a really great opportunity for us to come together and have some face-to-face conversations. But okay, let's see. I'm going to be getting up and down just to do the slides, and I will do my best to try to help move us along. We have about 10-12 minutes scheduled for like some background and context, specifically in our slideshow, but then we'll really dive into the discussions. A couple things with that. So in the agenda packet that was online, oh, thanks, Heidi. In the agenda packet that was online, it had both the DEI Commission ordinance, the work plan, the budget, and chapter 9 from the comprehensive plan. I also want to point out you have a handout with blue on the top. It's going to have more information to build off of the slideshow. And then there's also a list of the discussion questions, which we'll use when we get to those three points. But yeah, I think our main goal for today really is to have some authentic, vulnerable, and real conversations around how to establish trust in our community, help make sure everybody feels like they belong, and continue supporting one another. And so it's kind of the bigger intent. But okay, let me see if this mouse works from here. Cool. Okay, so I did a little bit of a brief overview, but like I said, we'll do some background and education. We'll have those 3 different topics, and then we'll end with kind of a call for support. And I will pass it over to Em.
All right, hi everyone. First of all, I just want to thank Commissioner Hofer for the effort to put together our slide packet, all these slides, edits and feedback. So in terms of diving into discussion, we just thought we wanted to model some of the ways in which we can have inclusivity in our conversation. A lot of these we are all familiar with, so speaking one at a time, listening to understand. This is a study session, so irrespective of whether we are on council or we're DEI commissioners, we only all get out of this what we put into this. So in terms of approaching this with a willingness to learn, understand, engage each other. Speaking from experience, respectful disagreement is always welcome. And again, our hard stop. So we're going to try to move this along as quickly as we can. Commissioner Hofer will work hard there might be a point in time where they have to interrupt us to sort of get along to the next point, and just want to be respectful of everyone's time too. And avoiding any sort of side talk or side combos.
You'll pass it to Nancy, who is our chair.
Hey, just a quick background of the commission and how we got started. In 2020, Commissioner Lilquist, our Councilmember Lilquist, Councilmember Ruth Tab, and I started having conversations about some of the things that we've heard in the community about people being harassed, some discriminatory kinds of things going on. So we started talking about it, and the conversation gained a lot of momentum after the George Floyd situation when he was murdered. So we asked council if we could form a subcommittee to kind of study what was going on in our city to get a better picture of what people who were from marginalized communities were feeling about how their lived experience was in this community. So we got permission from council for that. We modeled our process after a process we'd use on council prior to that we called our neighborhood visits or something like that. And anyway, we would contact people in neighborhoods and ask them to organize a group of folks around the table that lived around them. And we'd go to the homes and talk to people about the city and answer questions and the concerns that they had. So we set up, we came back to commission with a plan to do what we called a listening tour of focused on the marginalized communities in Ellensburg. Over the summer, we talked to 17 different groups. We talked to over 100 people. We had a standard set of questions that we ask every group. Our purpose was to listen and not to discuss or have conversation. Occasionally, if somebody said something that we needed clarification on, we'd ask for clarification on that, but that was all the conversation we had. We captured pages and pages and pages of feedback from the groups that met with us. In the fall of 2020, when we finished that work, we presented a report to the council with a recommendation that we consider forming a DEI commission. That was the number one recommendation that came from all of these community groups that we talked to, is that they knew if we were going to work on this issue in Ellensburg, we needed to have a system in place that was sustainable. And they felt like it was the role of the city to do that. So we brought that recommendation back to council. The report was accepted. There were about 30 different recommendations in that report. And if you'd like to see that, it's available online in the DEI Commission's page. But like I say, the first thing was to please form a commission to help with this work and to help drive the work that we did. So that's a little bit of the highlights of how we got to where we are. Council agreed, and so in January of 2021, we passed an ordinance that created the DEI Commission. It laid out the membership. It laid out what we're supposed to do. And I'll share a little bit of that with you. What some of the other things that we heard in 2020, it was interesting. Every group we talked to, different culture, different group of people, but themes rose to the top of the conversations. And one of the themes was some issues with the businesses in the community. not anything major, but some folks felt like they were being followed around in different places. We got everything from, I wish we had more soul food available in the grocery store, to I wish people would quit following me around in the grocery store when I'm by myself. Some of the issues that came out were with the school district, and, with everything that's happened at the school district in the past year or so, we were obviously hearing accurate information from that. And then there were issues on the campus of DWU. In spite of all the diversity efforts they had going on, there were still students who did not feel included and did not feel like they were valued. I want to say one of the things that came out too in just about every group we talked to, people love living in this town. They just didn't feel like they belonged, or that they had a voice, or that they were visible. So they're not going to be moving away. They're going to stay because they support Ellensburg and they love living here.
And
Some
there's-
of
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nancy.
Yeah.
Just in the interest of time.
Okay.
too, we do have in your handout too, there's some of the stuff that Nancy is referencing. We have a handful of bullets, but it's a really helpful background to share like the context and how we came to be. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Okay. We're moving right along here. I do this lovingly. I say all this lovingly. Tylene, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, hi, this is Tylene. So just kind of and in the interest of time as well, some of the things that we do assist Ellensburg City Council in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. As Nancy was talking about, is put out in the city ordinance. We provide input on cultural and diversity proclamations and programming and access efforts. And as mentioned, also, all of this stuff is in the Commission's 2025 agenda and work plan.
Thank you, Tylene.
We're not agenda.
Yeah, and that work plan has all of our outlined goals and kind of what we've been up to. We did want to put in a slide about what we don't do, because I think that a commission like ours, it can get pretty confusing. Like, what's our role? What's council's role? What's the staff role? And so we listed out a handful of things, like we don't create and enforce policy. That's you all. We don't represent a single identity group. We don't exclude anyone from community events. And again, this is all outlined in our ordinance. But we don't determine the city social media pages. We do help with the cultural day posts and as they're approved by staff, and I appreciate being able to be part of that. And then we don't dictate budgetary decisions. We follow all of the same budgetary approval processes as all the other commissions to city council. And so I'll pass it to M.
Good.
All right. So just in terms of what we have done and what we would like to do to date, the diversity, equity, inclusion, not only is it good business, we know that more diverse cities attract more diverse businesses. People return to small towns, they return to where they're from, they stick around to raise their families here. There's been comments about social students or transient or momentarily into town, but when we talk to them, what often bears out is, give us a place where I can establish a life. I can think about making friend groups or actually making this my home. And equity and inclusion is a big part of that. Being open and welcome to a diversity of identities and experiences is important. Some of the things that we've done today, and again, this is in your package as well. We've partnered with different commissions, Parks and Rec, with Central. We regularly hear feedback from CW and from the school district. We engage with local activities and processes like the farmers market, events like Juneteenth, which are open to all, cultural events like Unity Park grand opening. We have advised to date, and this is before my time, and so thank you for those who took this on listening devices interpretation, on accessibility, particularly in restroom and other places, and the flag and banner policy, and revamp the grants. So we're continuously taking feedback, much like the historic districts, the Parks and Rec, the water. I'm missing 2 grants here. I'm so sorry. But we take feedback continuously as to how we can best distribute those grants. Support different events in town, and champion the way that we actually our city recognizes these congressionally approved holidays and events.
Eileen?
So yeah, we wanted to include some examples. One of the things that I tell everybody about Ellensburg that I love about Ellensburg is there's always something going on the weekend, it seems like in Ellensburg. And we wanted to include some examples of some other either identity-based or identity and interest-based events going on in Ellensburg, like Ladies Night Out, Pride Parade, Juneteenth celebration, Indigenous People Day. These are all folks that are all events and opportunities that are open to everybody in the community. And I was thinking of a couple others when I was driving in here, the car shows that are in town, the Paint Ellensburg. I'm not an artist. I can't even draw attention, but you know, when I think of like the Paint Ellensburg and Jazz in the Valley, additionally, and then as a commission member, I think that it's important to say also that, you know, when we look at things like the interest-based or identity-based, like the fly fishing thing that we funded here a few years ago, that got quite a bit of feedback, you know, and I just want to acknowledge the fact that they've done this now 2 additional years since then, and there hasn't been a word said about it. You know, so even though we weren't supporting that year, it continued on for the next 2 years. But there was no comment on that one, so.
Exactly. And one other thing I want to point out with this, and we've had a lot of conversations with our subcommittee and other like community members and staff, and want to point out the rodeo as a really good example of an interest-based event that our community rallies around. And so you can go to the rodeo, appreciate rodeo culture, but you don't have to be a cowboy to appreciate it and to go. Same thing with like, right, Datsun's on parade. It's now opened. All dogs can go and they can't race, but there's still a case in point. Let the little dogs run. But yeah, so I think that's one of the best parts about our community is that we really do have a variety of events and activities for everyone's interests.
And they may not be of interest to everyone. Like, I'm not gonna necessarily do, well, I do I'm not necessarily gonna do Bike Month, but I do appreciate that these exist. Want to highlight that these events are open to all. They may not appeal to everyone, but that they are open to everyone. And that's part of what makes a strong community that attracts not only just tourists, but also residents and retains our residents here.
Is DEI claiming responsibility for the rodeo?
No.
That's what I want to understand. It seems like we're.
Can you use the microphone?
Can. Just when hearing about like the commingling of activities that have been here for well over 100 years and DEI since 2021, I want to make sure it's clear what DEI is claiming and isn't.
Yeah, I'll tag it on this one. No, we're not claiming any kind of responsibility. In fact, most of these are not government-run events or experiences. I think the intent behind this slide is to show that our community is really robust by having a variety of events and activities for people with different interests and identities. And so, to be clear, no, we are not taking responsibility. So, yeah.
Yeah. Even for things like the Pride Parade or when we recognize things like Indigenous People Heritage Month, the Equity Inclusion Commission, like these are not things that we run. We can support them, but I think we're pointing out more that there's been conversations about how some of these events that deal with identity-based events are exclusive to, but they're just like, they may not appeal to everyone's interests. I might, but similarly, not everyone might want to go to Dachshunds on Parade and race sorry, again, you cannot race your dog. Only Dachshunds can. But these more pointing out that these are events that make a stronger community. Yeah. Oh, I'm next anyway.
We can go on.
Yeah. Alrighty. So I won't spend any time on the left column. So these are laws and so we want to spend a quick minute differentiating between laws, particularly federal and state laws, and how these can play out and bear out when it comes to equity and inclusion in everyday life. So won't spend any time on the left-hand side. I know all council is familiar with these RCWs, with Title VII, with ADA, but did want to highlight the ways the commission has and can engage with policies and procedures. So, if laws are everything on the left-hand side primarily deals with employment and public discrimination. The right-hand side are ways that we can think about how equity and inclusion can mediate or step in to think about citizens' everyday life. So things like, no law demands that people have access to a lactation room. They demand particular things, but when we think about spaces, including in City Hall, in other public venues, those are spaces that can make a building more inclusive for others. We have an RCW that deals with discrimination and particularly veterans' rights. But if you have a conversation when it comes to equity and inclusion with some of our veterans, and many of us have done, we've had conversations not only about particularly focused groups, like we have a veterans book club in town, but also conversations about the rodeo, for instance. There are other communities around our size that during rodeos not only highlight beyond what we already do in terms of, yes, there's going to be fireworks. Here's some steps you can take if you are perhaps have strong reactions to things like fireworks. But other communities have back entrances to things like rodeos for veterans and for others that struggle with loud noises and large crowds. So that's a way that equity and inclusion can mediate the everyday lives of people. ADA, thinking about accessibility, there are particular requirements. We have places even on Central Washington University's ADA accessible campus that are flagged as non-ADA. But thinking about the space here, we've had people comment about the chairs in this very room that we're in as not being accessible for them. The DEI Commission has been lucky enough to have conversations when topics have come up related to translation and interpretation, rather than council having to reinvent the wheel when council sees it as important. I know council did, but to have opportunities to deal with how can we change the time limit that we have when translation or interpretation is something to that's needed during public comment. The DEI Commission can refer to research, documentation, the own voices of people broadly affected by the need for translation and and provide feedback. Part of our goal and part of our function and the ordinance is that we provide feedback. You can consult us. And so again, taking the burden off council to reinvent the wheel when it comes to how do we deal with time limits, when it comes to translation interpretation, equity inclusion already has a lot of that material present, equity inclusion, research, talking to community members. So again, this is just a broad overview of the differentiation between what laws at the federal and state level we already have, and thinking about what we need in our community, everyday requests and everyday lives. So they're two different things.
All right. So we're jumping into the discussion cards.
Just since we're in laws and policies, this is probably a good one. We've got 2 executive orders that are out there right now that will hold back federal funding if we proceed with DEI. I've read them 100 times over. It's very specific. I'm sure that with 9 members, you've read those as well. Can we, since we're right on laws and policies, can we talk about how we're potentially at risk of losing roughly $1 million a year in federal funding?
What I will say is I would pass that to city council, like the actual legal counsel in the room. I think with the federal executive orders that I have read that have come out, I think that some of them are being held up in the courts. And so I would pass that to like our lawyer on staff. Honestly, I'm not a lawyer. Yeah.
Executive order is how the law will be interpreted
Versus the law.
That's maybe something again to kick over to people with
Legal background. But I think it's a fair concern. I think there's a lot of conversations having.
We got a few hundred universities that are backpedaling like mad right now from these policies.
And some aren't, but there definitely are. And I see school districts doing it. And so
in many ways is publicly.
I think it creates a question for our community on like, okay, so how do we not only interpret the executive orders, but what do we want in our community? So if we need these resources, how do we look to other community members, the state, each other? But I don't know if we as a commission necessarily have answers, but would be happy to talk more about that in another way.
No, that's good, because just a second ago also, it was city council should refer to the commission for things even as minute as how much time do we give to a speaker? And so I'd figured we could, if that's the case, that city council could refer down to the commission and say, give us the answers on these. You would have the answers on these.
I think we can give advice.
We are a group selected because of our expertise or backgrounds, and like any other commission that y'all deal with, we're here to advise.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. And we're jumping into discussions. I think this is a good entry point.
Yeah. But yeah, again, we're like, I think it's stated across all the commissions that we're here to provide an advisory capacity we might not have all the answers, but I think when it comes to when we're thinking again about day-to-day life in Ellensburg, that's our goal. We can also consult with and have conversations about how do we deal with like Commissioner Hofer said, what we want to see available, what we want to see present and continued, while also taking under like dealing with whatever fluctuating state.
This is a good segue. Thank you. Okay, so it's a good segue into our discussion. So as we open this up, the first question I'll just pose, and anyone, council members, and that's a great example of a question. It's like, what questions do you have about the role or the scope of the DEI Commission? And so we'll start there. Like, we gave a very brief background. You all are very familiar with the ordinance and our work plan. And so what questions, are there other things like that were brought up? We can start a list of things. Again, we might not have answers today as a commission, but we'd love to continue the conversation. So what questions do you have about the role and scope? We'll start there. Or what would you like to talk about in relation to the role and scope? That could be council or anyone.
All right, so to the topic of role and scope, I think from the feedback we received in several of our city council meetings over the last couple of months, there is a perception on both sides associated with the DEI Commission. So I want to be very blunt and kind of get to those. One is from a perception on the need for formation, the DEI Commission, associated with what Commissioner Goodloe was talking about, perceptions as far as people in the community being unsafe, those kinds of things, being excluded, followed around. And then there are perceptions from the community members that openly speak about this, is that DEI is being exclusatory, especially if you happen to be, say, conventional straight white male Christian or something like that. Both of them are perceptions. Now, everybody has their reality grounded in that perception, and that's not to disregard anybody's perception on how they're feeling. The intention here is, how do we get to a common ground of being safe? So I'm curious, when it comes to the scope within the DEI Commission, how are you conveying that as far as that common ground for everyone?
Commissioners. If council can also respond. That's a great question. But yeah, go ahead.
So I mean, I think, and I don't know if this is going to answer your question or not, but this is kind of how I look at this. And I think we go back to the foundation of the DEI Commission when it was created, right? The commission, when the DEI was created, was a way of bringing historically marginalized voices and folks in the community the opportunity to listen to them and to find out what they felt would make Ellensburg a more inclusive space for them, right? And I think I hear what you're saying about the straight white Christian male, right? But I think at the same time, I think we have to find that balance between somebody that has historically had that voice in a community and balancing that out between folks that, and I can say this as a trans person in town, that historically hasn't had that voice. And the things that are the hurdles, and I'll talk to that a little bit tonight too, the hurdles and stuff that are put in place for some people to be able to have access to the city opportunities and resources that the city has to offer, if that makes sense. You know, if that answers your question.
It's a very complicated answer to that question. To say that.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Nancy. You go first.
So we have posted in the last 3 years, I guess 2 years, maybe three different community conversations. We had one at Hal Home, we had two at Hal Homes, and we had one at the campus. We are hoping to have another one this fall at the school, ESD. Those are organized to have conversation around a topic that everybody's going to have a different perspective on and help people appreciate other perspectives and talk to each other about those perspectives. Bringing people together and helping build relationships is one of the most important things that we can do for this community. And those discussions help us do that. Now, the question, we can put the event out there, but whether or not people come is up to them. It's not exclusive. It's open to everybody. It's hard to get some of the marginalized community folks to come out because they're too afraid to come to a conversation like that with other people in this community. So it's a struggle, but it's not an exclusive event.
And
Just-
I think they have one quick thought.
Yeah. And just to return it, like, I think just, beyond the commission as sort of like this group of people to sort of the human level. One thing I can say, I hope about myself, and I think all of my fellow commissioners, and I really admire about my fellow commissioners, even if we don't agree all the time, is their ability to do bridge building. So I know for a fact that every single commissioner has cisgendered, heterosexual, white Christian men in their lives, that I think despite the fact that a lot of people associate equity inclusion with maybe being an echo chamber, I know that all these people have been here building bridges, working hard at that. That's at the individual level, but I think I can also speak for my commissioners to say that no one here refuses conversations. I hear a lot of conversations about concerns about shifting issues when it comes to parents and child dynamics, things like that. And I can't think of a single commissioner that wouldn't be happy to have a conversation about there is the actual, there are the ways that people express anxieties and fears, and there's what we can feasibly do as human beings for each other and as a commission. Those are sometimes different things. Maybe I can't do a lot for you as a commissioner, but maybe I can hear you out as a human being, and maybe I can direct you to someone else who I know. So I will say that it's not a question on the applying for the DEI commission, but the bridge building, the relationship building that's done, I think that's important to acknowledge that is a skill that just a human element that I think commissioners need to and do model when it comes to equity inclusion.
Thank you for that. So a follow up on the role of DEI as far as the commission and scope. If you could kind of talk about the DEI commission, some of those programming things that were happening or not happening in our community that came out of the report that says this is something that we need. Just so I can understand, for frame of reference for people in the room that may not have been here before that time. I myself was here not until 2018, so.
Yeah, I also wasn't here, but I'd pass it to folks who were
You want to respond to that?
were
I
involved
can
with city
tell you that
council and
nothing
local
was
government
happening.
prior.
So please.
None of the things we've talked about that the DEI commission has done in our community were happening before this commission was formed.
So the grant program, right, that didn't exist beforehand, a lot of,
Have the grant programs.
yeah.
But
Was it folks around equity or, yeah, like trying to have more conversations about policy and.
no, there's no focus on equity or anything like that, but same grant programs we still have, and agencies apply for funds and they're either funded or they're not.
Go ahead. Yeah, please. Did you?
I guess when I look back, I've been on the council for a long time and I had not heard any of these stories. I had not heard about people being told to go back to where they came from, not heard about people who were in a city park and told you can't speak that language here, this park's not for you. I had not heard, those kinds of stories. So it was the listening sessions were an eye opener for me about what our community is about, and the different experiences that people have that I don't have. I've found Ellensburg to be a pretty welcoming place, but it's It is not to everyone. And I want to, I guess, push back a little on Nancy's statement that people aren't moving away. We heard about people moving away. We heard from people who weren't comfortable here, didn't feel welcome, and left. And the university in particular was, you know, trying to hire a diverse staff and ran into, you know, people quitting because they just didn't feel like Ellensburg was for them. Some of that's cultural. I mean, if you're from New York City, you come to Ellensburg, it's maybe not a good fit for you. Just, you know, there's a lot of things that come into play about why people feel welcome here. And so, you know, and it's not always because of identity politics, but we did particularly hear from.
So we also heard from the folks that we were aware of that moved away that the problems that their kids were having in school was one of the main reasons they moved.
Thank you. Additional questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're going to move on probably to the next discussion topic.
That's
but
fine. This
They all
is in
overlap.
line with the meaningful success. Looks like, what does the commission look like?
Yeah, great.
We've got 9 members on the commission, 7 run the city in terms of 7 members on a city council. We got 9 for the DEI commission. Does the DEI commission feel like all people are represented by this commission? Because when we look at 309 amendments being submitted, that is a lot of people who they feel excluded from the inclusivity that's being preached. And so I want to know, like, has there even been an attempt to balance out a 9-member commission to get, you know, more conservative voices? I know some have applied and then they get ground up in the gears and spit out. So is there, I mean, any attempt?
Who would like to take this? Oh, Tracy, yeah. Like, I don't want to speak for all these questions. I know I'm.
You can, Nancy. And
Yeah.
You've also got Commission Member Backlund with his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Phil.
Oh, no problem. I would like to address that particular point. I'm an old white male, and one of the things that I've thought about over the years living in Ellensburg, and I've been here for quite a long time, is there's a lot of differences in education and class level as well that I don't know if we're paying a lot of attention to as a commission. For example, we have done a lot of listening tours, and I love the listening tours. I really enjoy them, learned a lot from the various marginalized groups that we've talked with, and a lot of those things have gone into our reports. Should we go to the Moose Lodge and do the same kind of listening tour with them, go to FFA, go to the rodeo board, go to some of the churches and do the same kind of things, and especially the ones that are predominantly white, and finding out what their role is and how they perceive the community, ask them the same kinds of questions we're asking everybody else. So that would be something, at least in my mind, would be able to perhaps bridge a little bit of the divide and get some other information. When we did the people who wrote in about, the 309 people who wrote in about deleting the DI commission, I was really surprised at how little they actually knew about what we did. And there's 2 ways they can learn. One of them is they can do their own research and come to the meetings and look at what is available online, or we can go to them and help them understand what we do and what our role is. We haven't gone to them, and I'm wondering, back to the scope question, if that should be some of the things, something we put into our scope, and getting the idea of going out and reaching out to all kinds of groups that are traditionally the mainstream groups, but they may not feel that way right now. So I'd like us to really maybe think about that as we move forward as how we can conceive ourselves as a commission.
Thanks, Phil. I do want to add in, because I know Nancy and Teresa want to tag in as well.
I want to point out that the membership of the commission is laid out in the ordinance that formed us. And so the applications that we take come from those groups that are identified in the ordinance.
I'll also add, because I have been on a handful of the commissioner interviews. I'll add that we don't ask about political background. It's nonpartisan commission. We ask about equity. We ask about what does diversity and inclusion look like in this community within the context of the ordinance. And so I think none of us have ever openly talked about our political views. I think the community and that question leads some assumptions, but I can understand where, right? Like if it's so politicized and polarized, I could see where it comes from, but we don't ask about political background, but I know you had a thought too, Teresa.
So I know I was not chosen for my Blackness. Absolutely not. I couldn't have been because I'm gonna let me finish. I never interrupted you. And so I think I was chosen for my skill set. I was chosen because I think I'm a worker bee. And I feel like my other commissioners put in work in the community. I serve this community every single day. And in the last, the city council meeting, I talked about despite how much people yell at me when I'm on my bike and say nasty things to me, I still serve this community. I run the Ellensburg Bail Fund. And the majority of the people that I bail out are white men, white people. And so it's not about what we think or what community we represent. It's about what you're willing to do and work for on this commission. So I consider myself a community organizer, someone who fights for social justice for every single person. I'm the Black lady who bails out all the white folks at the jail. And it's not about my race or my gender. It's because I believe in second chances. I believe we must all fight against poverty. I believe that we all want the same things. It's just, it's crazy to me that you don't see that these things that we're doing helps everyone. It is an act of kindness. It's an act of humanity in the work that we do. And I know it's definitely in the work that I do. And and that's why I'm on the commission.
I'm sorry, real quick. I said conservative. Conservative isn't just white. We've got Hispanic conservatives. We've got African-American conservatives. I said conservatives. I never made it a racial thing. And I will not be allowed to just be painted in that brush that I'm coming across this as racist. I said conservative voices. And that's across the gender
Commissioner Devine
racial
didn't
spectrum.
call anyone racist. Commissioner Devine didn't call anyone racist. I just want to make it clear.
We're gonna move on to the next section.
Can Commissioner Cleary had something to say?
I just said, I want to remind you that we don't ask that. So there's no way that we would know whether
Alright.
anybody was conservative or not.
But I think that we can add that to the list of continued conversations, because I think that it's something we've heard from communities as well. And so what does conservative voices look like within the context of equity and inclusion? So, okay, so we're gonna go on to information sharing. I know that I wish we had 3 hours for this. In general, like this entire conversation. So let's start with, because I think, again, we've heard a lot of community voices. We've had some individual one-on-one dialogues. And so what does information sharing look like between City Council and the DEI Commission? What's working? What could we improve upon? And let's start there. Okay? Yes.
First, Amber, great way to lead this meeting. I think you're doing a great job. Thanks. Thank you for that. I think some of the things that the DEI Commission has put before the council is always nice to have additional information whenever we ask. And I don't think there's been a time that you haven't provided that. I think one of the things that we've seen in some of the comments, both feedbacks on both sides of this discussion, is some of the information that helped form the commission and some of the goals that were here. You talked about the walking tours and those kinds of things, but even the evaluation with other cities that you were looking at comparable size, those evaluations, I think those would be helpful for the contents of painting a picture on how you arrived at we need a DEI commission. It's not just a programming thing. Or is it a programming thing? We don't need a DEI commission. I don't know. I'm just curious about that information so that we could have that. So I think that's important as far as information sharing, not just for the city council, but for the broader public.
Okay, other thoughts? What's working? What could we improve? Opportunities? Commissioners, council, is open for anybody.
And again, just want to highlight that in your package, there is some more detail about in terms of information sharing, what we would like to do and for further conversations we'd love to have about what we're hearing and what we'd like to help clarify. So each of these could definitely take up 50 minutes alone, each of these topics, but just want to make sure that the council notes that we're willing to, more than happy to have conversations about the scope of the commission, what we actually do cover, what we don't cover, what we can do. We're willing to have a discussion, even if it's not under our framework. That's all in the package too. That's your last component there. But thank you for raising that.
So yeah, this is potentially fairly specific, but in relation to the listening tours, and granted, I've been at a handful of them, and they're targeted at specific audiences, but I think it would help from my perspective to understand, not only the feedback that we're getting, but the specific questions that we were asked, but also tie that back to the audience that was targeted. And I would like the listening tours to consider taking on a sort of framing what local government can and can't do and what it is, almost a civics class. And I'll give you a very brief example that a couple of the sessions that I've been to have been with CWU students, and the expectation, I think, in what they were communicating is that the city can create ethnic food restaurants and, create opportunities, and things that really aren't in the purview of a city. And I think it's important for people who are new to a community to understand how their government works, because that gives them the power to actually push on the pieces that actually make things work, because some of the communication back, I think, is lost. And if we don't close that loop, then they're left with the impression you didn't listen to them or we didn't listen to them. And so I think there needs to be expectations. And I think, and this is true of the entire country, not just Ellensburg or specific groups, but people don't understand how their government works.
I think that's helpful for our relationship between council and the commission generally. I think even if we can't make those changes, by listening to that and taking that feedback, we might be able to say, that's a great point. I hear you. And again, people that have that experiences doing what Commissioner Devine pointed out, that like bridge building work, that work might be able to parse that in terms of, okay, you're asking for ethnic food restaurants. I can't help you out there. I'm not independently wealthy, but what I am hearing is that you have a need for a space where you feel like you have access to parts of your identity or your culture. Okay, here's the things we know about. Here's other resources. Here's what we can do. I think that's valuable generally when it comes to, that's outside the purview of the listening tours, but I think leading with some sort of framework, here's what we can accomplish, here's what we can't. I think even with discussions generally, there's, I think, impassioned and emotional topics that come up, every couple of weeks here that aren't under the framework of the DE. We actually, they're outside of our hands. They're actually more appropriate for other commissions that we already have that are viable. But we can take that information on board and say, we're welcome to having discussions about that if you would like the commission to provide some sort of advisory component to council about those topics. That's what we're here for. So I think that's a great way. Sir, go ahead.
Okay, a few more minutes. Nancy, you go right ahead, and then I have another thought too. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to spin off what Rich was saying. I go back to what is the basic city function of a city, and we build public spaces, so we want to make those inclusive. They work for everyone, and we have services, and so we want to make sure that the city's interaction with our residents is a good one. There are elements of the comp plan and the work plan that extend into the community. So I'm very comfortable saying city government, your advice to the city government, and how we do those things. I think we need a conversation about what the role is in establishing community norms or values, because I think that's where we're getting some pushback is the perception that we're trying to say that this lifestyle is good or bad. And I think that's where we need to tread carefully. But just topic for conversation.
Add it to the list. I know we have about one more minute to, one of the things I want to point out, and I know, it was pointed out a second ago, I think for me, one of the things I would love help with between our two organizations, our commission, council, is helping to clarify and disrupt any misinformation or conflicting or provide clarity. I think that the game of telephone happens really, really fast. And I think the way that, right, I might say, I really like, I don't know, your green shirt. And you might say, Amber only likes green shirts. And I think that it can easily get spun. And I know that's a simplistic and kind of a silly example. And I think that that is a huge opportunity for us to work together. And so there are a handful in your packet. I think we could spend many, many hours. And so my last question, so we can, it's 6:50, we're wrapping up. So my last question I'll leave you with that you can send us an email about is other topics and ongoing conversation opportunities. So we have to flip the room though. Please email us. Let's continue the conversation. Thank you.
We're going to recommence at 1900.
Thank you all. Much appreciated.